Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to From Rookie to Powerhouse, Transforming Sellers with Enablement. Such a strong name. What a powerful name. We're missing one person, so we'll wait for Dennis to hop on stage with us, and then we can get started. There he is. Hi, Dennis. All right. And then I just noticed that Dennis, Sean, and I are all rocking the plaid. Jessica's got the stripes, and Greg is the only one in the solid colors, but that's all right. So we almost synced up today. Welcome, everyone. Very excited to see you all here. Today, we're going to be talking about transforming your sellers with enablement. And today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. If you are not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, or MSP as we like to call it, we are the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and rev ops, sales development, all the other supporting disciplines. And our mission is to create an environment for our 20,000 and constantly growing members to answer questions they might struggle to solve on their own or see around corners they might not know even exist. We do that through great live sessions like the one you're at here today on a Monday if you're joining us. Praise be, because that's amazing. And we do that through some in-person happy hours as well. We did our first one last week and it was fantastic. If you like this content, you will also love our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit that's happening April 12th through 14th. We've pulled together 11 events. That's so many events of amazing content and speakers. And you're going to hear from revenue leaders at Drift, Lean Data, Pendo, Dialpad, Figma, Atrium, so many more. And I just dropped the link in the chat, the wrong chat. I'll put it in the right chat here for you to get signed up. That's enough about MSP and enough from me. This event would not be possible without our sponsor at Allego. So Dennis, I'm going to pass it to you to give us a little bit about why you love Allego.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Dennis Oljai. I lead product marketing at Allego, and we are a sales enablement platform that helps train and coach top performing sales teams and arm them with the content and knowledge they need to succeed in an increasingly virtual world. And we're really excited to be here with everybody to discuss the ins and outs of sales enablement and how we can learn from one another in this great session. So thanks for having us on.
Wow, that was so succinct and got me hyped up. Awesome. Let's introduce our wonderful speakers today. Dennis, I'll pop it back to you so you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Like I said, I'm a senior director of product marketing at Allego. So basically, what does that mean? Working on messaging, positioning, working very closely with Jessica Peck, who's also on the line here with us at Allego to enable our sales teams.
Lovely to have you here, Jessica. Only natural, I'm going to pass to you next.
Great. Yes, I'm Jessica Peck. I'm the sales content manager here at Allego. So I'm part of our sales enablement team, and I'm very specifically focused on helping to manage our internal usage of Allego, including our content systems and learning programs. And prior to working at Allego, I did course design and learning design at Salesforce for about 5 years.
Awesome. Welcome. Sean, I'll pop to you.
Hey, my name is Sean Fowler. I am the VP of Sales Enablement at a company called Attentive. We sell digital marketing, especially text message marketing. It's been incredible results we've had over the last couple of years. We went from a 300 company size to a 1,300 company size in the last 24 months. Before Attentive, I ran sales enablement at SalesLoft as well. So I've been associated with MSP for a very long time. I'm happy to hear the in-person happy hours are back. I've had many a beer at those. Looking forward to joining
Sean,
again.
We better see you at the in-person happy hour. And are you going to come to New York or San Francisco? I'm in New York, so which one are you coming to?
I might have to figure out how to make the New York happen.
Woo! All right, we'll see you there. Awesome. Thanks, Sean. And last but not least, Greg, I'm pop to you.
Hey, hi, my name is Greg Larson. I am the VP of RevOps for Straker Translations. It's a global translation, automation, and services company. My background is probably different than everyone else on the panel. I come from a sales background, sales leadership background, so helping bridge that sales to marketing to product marketing on the enablement side. So I've been a part of mostly tech SaaS companies, Qualtrics, and a few others that have exited, and now with Straker leading their RevOps team.
Awesome. We've got so many backgrounds here. Really excited to dive in. But before we do that, I want to give a few housekeeping notes. We would never let this content just float into the ether. You've got 4 great panelists here to give you all the insight you need on how to transform your sellers. We're not going to just let that go. Of course, you are going to get the recording after this. Depending on how fast I can work, it'll be 1 hour to 3 to 4 hours, but you will have access to the recording and it will live on our website forever, so you can always come back to it. And our second housekeeping note is we love for these to be really interactive. You have FaceTime here, sort of, with these amazing folks, so please do ask any questions in the Q&A tab, or you can chat them. I see it's a little active in the chat already. If you want to give some thumbs up, some emojis, please go ahead and do that. We love to see it. All right, here's our agenda for today. Today, we're going to talk about how enablement can help organizations overcome competing priorities, multiple stakeholders, and a lack of understanding. Then we'll move to the importance of developing and managing sales content with impact and clarity. Then how to craft clearly defined roles and goals and the best practices for communicating those. And lastly, we'll wrap it up with how to enable those teams in a hybrid environment. We all know how wild it's been these past couple of months. So let's dive right in. Let's talk about how enablement can help organizations overcome competing priorities, multiple stakeholders, and a lack of understanding. And Dennis, I think it's only natural. Let's start with you right off the bat.
Sure thing. So I think, in some of our preparation for this event, I was thinking about this, and I think the best way to represent sales enablement, at least in my mind, is where really the rubber hits the road, right? It's where go-to-market strategy turns into execution and partnership with the sales team, right? So it's really important for product marketing and sales teams to be 100% aligned on not only just your market positioning, but your target audiences, the sales focus, and what the different roles in the buyer journey are responsible for in order to ensure that enablement success, right? So I think when it comes down to it, our duty as enablement professionals and those that support enablement, such as product marketing, is really to bridge this gap and unite these teams together, right? Whether it's product, marketing, or sales teams, with a common understanding of your go-to-market strategy, and equip these teams with the knowledge, tools, and really the focus to make it happen. And it's really easy to sometimes assume that all these stakeholders are on the same page and have the same goals in mind. But I believe it's really important to make sure that you're reconfirming your strategy and alignment often. That's my sort of top tip to ensure you don't fall into this pitfall, right? And I think QBRs are a good place to do this. Quarterly business reviews, you might have a similar meeting of the mind, so to speak, on a regular basis in your organization, but it's typically done 4 times a year, right? Just because I think it's too often that I've seen teams assume that they're on the same page, right? With how fast the market's evolving and how fast product is shipping, right? And you're evolving your feature set. It's really important for these teams to come together and align on an ongoing basis. And I've created sort of a grid. I'm a visual guy. So I wanted to sort of provide a resource for folks here to help do this, right? This is something that I do at Allego and in prior organizations I've worked at, such as Dun & Bradstreet and Canon. And actually, I used to be a seller back in the day as well, selling door to door. But, having this visual and making sure that all stakeholders are aligned is really critical, right? So you can customize this to your needs in your business, but sort of the rows represent the different sizes or the segments of business, right? You might have an enterprise sales team, you might have a mid-market team, you might have a small business team, right? And then columns represent your personas or your use cases that you're focused on, right? So it might be persona 1, persona 2, persona 3, you might be a single product and market kind of company, but ultimately your products are going to align to different segments, and your sellers and your SDRs are likely going to be structured around this framework in some fashion. So I think it's really important to have this common understanding of where your products are positioned, what sales teams are focused on which areas, and what the expectations for knowledge and skills are for those different teams. So just wanted to share sort of a quick visual that's helped me in this effort. And I hope that our viewers also get value out of this and trying to tailor this and tweak it to your needs.
I love it. I'm a visual person as well, so this is really helpful. Before I move on to the next person, any comments from our panelists? Anybody in the chat have something they want to follow up on here? Awesome. All right, Jessica, I'll pass to you.
Sure. I mean, I just wanted to echo what Dennis said about, I think you said bridging the gap. I think when I think about my own role and what's really valuable about sales enablement is the ability to be that person that helps to bridge gaps between different departments. So I've always found that relationship building is really important in this role. It's, you understand your sales leadership, you talk to your reps all the time, you have those relationships, but then you're also going across the organization and you're meeting with different departments and having conversations and understanding their priorities and where they are and being able to kind of associate those together. And I know like Dennis and I work together so frequently. I think we talk at least once a week, but realistically sometimes like every day. So just having that relationship building is so important in this role and so valuable.
Jessica, do you see any common challenges in the relationship building piece?
Common challenges across the different teams, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, usually it's those competing priorities. Like you said, I think everybody's so busy and everybody has a vision for things and what they need to get done. So it's that's always the challenge, is trying to navigate, where are your priorities, where are our priorities, how can we work together to find common success?
Awesome, thank you. Greg, I'll pass to you next.
Yeah, so for me, in my role overseeing all of the revenue operations engine is very much similar to what Jessica said, is making sure that all of the departments are aligned. So recently, Straker actually acquired several companies, and I was part of one of those companies that was acquired a few years ago. And as we got into the global system, I realized that the other sales teams had no idea what the technology that they just acquired could actually do. And so they were out, and as we were listening to deals, they were losing some deals that we could now solve because they weren't up to speed on the technology and on the product offering. And so that's where RevOps and product marketing and sales all need to be on the same page, because that offering is changing. In the right company, that offering should be evolving almost on a weekly basis. And if sales guys are on the forefront of those deals and they don't know, hey, we just added this new capability or we just added this value, then they're potentially losing out on those deals. And so it's really essential to make sure that you're out with the frontline sales reps, understanding those sales calls, understanding what objections they're getting, and making sure that the enablement side is actually providing ammo and content to position themselves in a good place for those conversations.
Sorry, I'm taking good notes over here. Does anyone have any comments on what Greg's saying there? I like that ammo piece.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Greg said. I think it's not only is the product set changing quickly, but at some organizations I've worked at, new products are also introduced on an ongoing basis, which can make it really complicated for sellers to know, hey, what's my required level of knowledge by different products that are, coming on the truck, so to speak. So it's really important, especially for some of those new products or new features that are coming out, to have an ear to the ground, right? And listen to all of those sales conversations and how buyer interactions are happening, and how you can get some of that feedback on the messaging and the positioning and send it back to the marketing team, right? And send it back to the enablement team so that you can shape your learning and development programs appropriately. And there's offerings out there that help you do that, right? But in today's virtual world, one benefit is you can record all of your calls, right? And have all that information at your fingertips. So that's one of the benefits of the hybrid world that we live in today.
Awesome. Thanks, Dennis. Sean, last but not least.
Yeah, I when I first got into enablement, I made the mistake of trying to do all the things people asked me to do, right? Because they were all good ideas. They were all fantastic ideas. Actually, it's just, even if I could have done all of them, the team couldn't have absorbed all the change, right? And the reality is you've got to relentlessly prioritize. And I actually think oftentimes enablement and operations together are the ones who have to figure out, like, what are we actually going to do as an organization, right? And that means deciding what you're not going to do. And for me, it all comes back down to the sales math, Like, I feel like enablement and operations together need to understand the sales math like the back of their hands. They can figure out where the gaps are and what you need to do to fill the gap, or what's working and what you need to do to maximize that thing that's working. And from an enablement perspective, I focus on two kind of parallel North Stars, which I think makes the analogy break down. But I guess they're twin stars. One of them is ramp time, right? If you're hiring a lot, which a lot of, high growth companies are, then understanding like what your ramp times are by role, what you would like to be, and how you can maximize the reduction of that ramp time, right? And the second one is sales productivity, which is essentially, let's say you got a quarterly number, basically what is the bookings created that quarter divided by the number of reps you have that quarter, right? How do you maintain that or get it going up, right? A lot of times if you're growing very rapidly, simply maintaining is good, because it's hard to increase productivity when you're basically taking the pie and cutting it up into smaller pieces for everybody. So I look at those two things and then use that as a way to back into what are the levers we have to pull to reduce our ramp time or increase our sales productivity, and then have conversations with the other sales leaders in the organization in order to figure out, like, is this the most important thing for us to do? And typically that gives me permission to say no to a lot of other things, right? Because the reality is it's better to do one or two things really well per quarter than it is to do a bunch of things and not do them well at all. And the second thing I look at there is manager alignment, like sitting down with the managers as much as possible, deciding like what we should focus on, getting their feedback. It's something that I'm not always great at either, by the way. It's hard to kind of constantly go back and get more input, but I try to be more intentional about that, because if you can get real manager alignment, you can agree to let go of some things and not do some things because it's a distraction. And ultimately, they're going to be the ones who reinforce all the stuff you introduce anyway. So you've got to kind of approach that as a team.
Awesome. Any comments on what Sean just dropped? That mic drop you just did there? Okay, cool. I think when you said math, my heart raced a little bit because I'm not really good at math, but I love what you're saying about the enablement and that operations piece. So last Friday we had an event on operations. It was sales and marketing ops and the importance of like alignment and communication. So I felt like we were bookending last week on operations and you're starting us back up again. So continuing that awesome MSP content. All right, fantastic. So let's move on to the second point here, which is the importance of developing and managing sales content with impact and clarity. And Greg, I'm gonna have you start this time.
Yeah, so with my background, there's probably competing views, and all the other panelists, please disagree with me on this. From a lot of sales guys, they say, oh, the marketing content or the enablement content is just, it's not what I need to sell, or there's kind of a battle there. And so managing the content that enablement is delivering to sales is super important, like has already been mentioned, to make sure that it's not a two-sided conversation. You're on the same side of the sales team and you're trying to help them solve the problems that they're facing. So the first part is you have to understand those problems. You have to understand, like Sean was mentioning, the gaps and what's missing, where am I lacking support in delivering this value to my prospect or to my client. And the second is also understanding the way that content might need to be delivered in different ways. So some people, as Dennis had said, some people are very visual. Some people learn better from audio. Some people will learn better from you get, a developer in and they want to see the specs. They want to see, a lot of the time they want to see a lot more detail. And so understanding what your audience is expecting and helping have different modes of the same content for the sales team to use based on their experience and their gut feeling is really important in my mind. And also, and there's not an easy way to do this, but walking that line, like Sean mentioned, of listening to the sales team, but not becoming yes men or women to the sales team and just, I need a white paper on this, or I need this case study, or I need this. oftentimes, if sales says something on a whim, it's taken as like, hey, the VP of sales is going to fire me if I don't create this content, even though maybe they can, maybe they can't. But then you just get too much of it and none of it really is impactful. And so I don't have the silver bullet of like where that is, but I see both sides of it. And so that's where I always just advocate that the enablement team and the sales team need to be the same team. It can't be, I'm supporting you. You're a partner in the sales organization. And if they don't see you that way, then that fundamentally needs to change, because they can't do it by themselves, even if they think they can.
I'd love to see some fire emojis in the chat for that piece there. Enablement and the sales team need to be the same team. Greg, you came up with this, or you just said this piece about the importance of the content, making sure it's like actually relevant and impactful. And I think that flows into what Jessica has to say about the meaning of the content, or like the purpose of the content. So Jessica, I'd love to pass to you.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I've developed a lot of content for the sales team with marketing and others. And when I'm developing content, I think I try to think about a full circle loop, so to speak, of making sure that you're getting feedback from sales and others throughout the process of building that content. So like you were talking about, hey, I need this. So stopping and saying, okay, well, what is it exactly that you're looking for? Getting some of that really detail about like, what is the importance of this? What's the impact? What is the outcome that you're looking for? And then as you're designing that content, taking time to get feedback throughout that process. So it's not just like, okay, cool, let me run and throw this together and put it out there and then good luck. It's like, okay, I've started building this. Am I on the right track? Is this the right approach? And then once you have the content and it's out in the world, taking the time to actually look at how it's working and how it's being received by the team, and iterating on it based on that feedback. So I think one of the great value of this new hybrid world, I think Dennis said this, is like we can actually record calls and see how things are working. So you have the ability to say, okay, how is the salesperson actually taking this content and using it in a real world scenario? And then based on that, how can I modify this to make sure that it's continuing to be relevant, it's continuing to add value? Maybe the salesperson is doing it in a way that's even better than what we thought, what our original vision was. And so we can take some of that and build it in. So that, I think that's really a best practice way to, think of the content lifecycle in general.
I love that keyword you said, build it in, because I think it flows perfectly into what Sean's going to talk about with building a content blueprint. Sean, can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I have a difficult history with sales content because I've built a lot of it in the past because people asked for it, and then I would spend like 8 hours building like a one sheeter because somebody asked for it and it got used like 3 times, and it burned me. And as a former salesperson and a former sales manager, this might be controversial, but I think sales content is a lot like poetry, in that like 85% of it's bad, but the good stuff is incredible. It's just kind of hard to know what's going to be the good stuff ahead of time. One thing that's been really successful for me, I've just finished it actually at Attentive recently. It's the 3rd company I've done it at, is a content blueprint, which is essentially sitting down with a handful of your best sellers. They usually do like a field sales council or something like that, so that we've got like a collection of people from across the sales organization and sales leaders as well, and breaking it down by stage of your sales process and saying like, what are the essential pieces of content? What are the essential customer facing assets we need and internal assets that we need to execute this stage of the sales process? And it's not like a wish list. It's like, what are the essential pieces? What are the most important things for us to have at this stage of the process? Who's it aimed at? What are we hoping to get out of it? Right. And if you finish that entire thing and you've got more than 25 or 30 pieces of content, you need to go back and look at it again and pull some of it out. Right. And then saying, hey, these are the pieces of content that we're going to create, because there's going to be a gap. Some of the content that already exists, some of it is going to exist, but it kind of sucks and you need to start over, or you need to refresh it. And some of it just doesn't exist at all. And so then you work on building like a really high quality set of content. And then you assign an owner and contributors and a frequency with which that piece of content needs to be updated. Because that's the other problem, is if you make all the content for everybody, after a while, you've got this wasteland of content. Nobody can find what they need. People are using a deck from a year ago, right? Or an integration slide that's not accurate anymore. And so you put some governance around like the creation and updating of content. And then when somebody requests something, are they requesting a net new piece of content? Are they requesting an update to an existing piece of content? And it's okay to say no, because part of the conversation you have with the leadership is like, unless there's a strong reason to change this, we're not going to change it, right? It's going to be intentional going forward. Now, it sounds cleaner than it usually is. Usually, some things slip through or whatever, but at least it provides some governance around what you're doing and some agreement about it. The second thing that I want to talk about is, for me, the most important thing you do in enablement is process, right? Whenever you roll any initiative out, you're trying to train people to execute a specific process. It can be a big process, like a value selling framework, or it can be a small process, like here's how you handle this specific objection with this specific competitor, right? But you want people to execute that process. And if you create a piece of content, it's designed to facilitate the execution of that process. And if you don't know what process you're trying to drive with the piece of content you're creating, that's a pretty strong signal that you shouldn't be creating that piece of content, right? So I always try to think like, what is the conversation they're supposed to have with this piece of content? What is the process this is driving? How am I going to train people to use it so we make sure we actually get adoption of this piece of content? It takes a lot more time for each piece of content to do it that way, but you should have more effective content as a result.
That's awesome. And it goes along so well with what you were saying about the operations and the enablement piece together. That's what ops does. Make sure you've got that processes. And I swear this is just totally natural, but I think, Dennis, it's only natural that you go last because you kind of wrap up all of these things and you have this great graphic to show it.
Yeah, I mean, as Sean was talking, I felt like we were on the same page, and it's almost like I'm unintentionally teeing up exactly what you said, Sean, because it's so important to put content in context, right, of the sales process, not only to make it easier to find, but to make sure that you have the bare essentials that's required for success at each stage of that process, right? I think I read an article the other day from McKinsey saying that 90% of organizations agree that the need to personalize experiences is driving sales and marketing and enablement to kind of work together, right? And I think that's the root of the problem or not problem, but I'll say request from sales to continually change and iterate, right? Because you have to in this day and age. You can't just send a generic brochure or one sheet or deck and be off with it, right? Sellers need to personalize the content and make it relevant for their buyer, and that's driving all the requests to change. But I think similar to what Greg said earlier, we can't be just yes men and create every single piece of content that's coming from sales. You need to create those bare essentials and the ones that are required for each stage, and make it in a way that I think is easy to customize or tailor, but doesn't add to the clutter, right, for everyone else. So I think you just have to find a balance there of what do you make accessible to everyone, and how can you arm sellers and teams to personalize it for their specific deal? Because the same study that I was reading said that 60% of sellers still ignore content created by marketing. Why? Probably because it doesn't really fit their need to personalize and make it unique for the situations that they're in, right? And I think also, there's too often I've seen content just sort of thrown into a repository, right? You go on a live session, you say, here it is, and then you go off and you expect everyone to know where it is, right? It's too difficult in today's selling environment to, remember all of that and know where to go and find those things. So I think the easier you make it and serve up content by the specific stages that your sellers are in, the more adoption you're going to get and the more clear it's going to be on how to use that. So if you queue up that slide that I prepared for this, you'll see, there's going to be a million different variations of this, but you can think of sort of awareness, consideration, decision, right? I mean, it's basic form. That's the sales journey, right? And there's specific outcomes that sellers need to drive. And you can even tailor that by role, right? An SDR has to do very different things. An AE needs to do very different things, or an AM, steps in probably after the close and tries to expand, right? So you can create different versions of this based on your roles in your organization. But what are the key pieces of content, like Sean was saying, right, at each stage that they should be using that they can easily access, right, at the moment of need, when they are, early in a buying process, or, midway through an opportunity. What I also like to do is actually put teammates that they can pull in as well. So put content in context of who can help support at those different journey stages. And also the tools that you're arming them with, right? I mean, sellers are burdened by, an average of, 8 to 10 different tools that they're using, their list building tool, their CRM, their training tool, right? So try to put some of those technologies in context as well, and just sort of have like a cheat sheet for your organization to help sort of drive the effectiveness of the content. So just an idea, we'll share this. And again, you can create a version of this that's branded by your company, and, you can hyperlink the different pieces of content. And I've seen this work really well.
Amazing.
That's great, Dennis. This is shockingly like what I use too. I love that. That's fantastic.
I know.
You made me think of something.
When you were speaking,
you made me think of something too. If product marketing and enablement working together is like, I feel like we're like cousins in the family, like the cousins who like have to work with all the other teams to filter everything out. If anybody in this meeting is making content, do everyone in sales a favor and make slides that are easy to edit, because Dennis nailed something that is a pain point for a lot of salespeople, which is they want to personalize the content, as he said, and a lot of times slides that are made, especially by marketing, are not easily customizable or easily editable. And so when you're designing slides, design specific slides so that they can be easily edited by sales, and then train them on how to do that. That's a really important thing. When I was at Sales Loft, one of our directors of product marketing, Alexandria Snow, would run sessions for the team, which was like, here's how you edit slides in Google Slides, right? And she would use examples from the deck. And it was like life-changing, because a lot of the reps had never been through that training before, and they didn't understand there's some really simple, basic things you can do to make it look good and consistent when you're editing those slides. And it's just a simple thing that can go a long way.
Awesome. All right, so we've got our rundown on content here. I want to move on to the next thing, which is actually talking about defined roles and goals. All of you have touched on this a little bit, but let's dive a little deeper. And Sean, you just finished talking, I know, but I'd love to have you speak first for this next topic.
Oh, nobody else is going to get to talk then. No, I'll go quick. Yeah, I mean, for me, like getting clarity and then defining best practices, there's a few key things to focus on there. The first one is that goals and best practices are kind of like comp plans. The more complicated they get, the less useful they are, right? Like you got to keep them really simple so people understand them and can remember them. Once things start to get beyond 3 or 4 or 5 things, you might as well not have any things, right? Because people start to get confused and they can't stay focused. Second thing I like to think about is like, the more you can involve the team in creating those things, the more you can actually get like representatives from across the org to take part in the definition of goals, to take part in the definition of those roles, the better things are going to be. And this is especially true with best practices. Like, the way to do enablement wrong is to come in and say, this is the way you should be doing it, right? Like, it's better to go watch videos the team has created, to go watch Gone calls, to go see what's working right now, and then optimize that and roll it out. Because there are people who have already figured out what's working. Your job in enablement is just to identify that and get everybody doing those things, right? So coming in and trying to dictate some of those things is the wrong way to do it. And when you roll it out, actually get the reps to do it as well. I like to use a combination of the best reps, or the ones with the most credibility, and the ones candidly who are kind of difficult. Like, I always try to include the difficult reps during the brainstorming process, because number one, they're going to help us create a better product, right? Because they're difficult, they're going to argue, they're going to push back. And number two, because if they're bought in, then when you roll it out, other people are going to be bought in too. So if you can get them to record themselves using the talk track, if you can get them to record themselves doing this objection handling technique, other people are going to do it too, because they recognize that these are the ones who typically push back.
That's great. Greg, I think you have something sort of similar, maybe not on such difficult people, but you talk about people over process.
Yeah. So, I mean, with RevOps is such a new thing, but there's two sides of it. You can focus on all of the operations and the technology and everything to create this systemic process. But if you lose sight of the people that you're assigning these roles to and the people that are actually fulfilling and reaching the goals, then honestly, they might hit the goal, but you're not going to have as much impact on their career or on the company itself. And so I have come from really fast growing companies to startups to, large enterprises. And the one thing that was successful at all of them was in enabling the people in the roles. One, help them understand the role, like Sean said, give them the specific goals. When all of the departments have one common goal in mind, that's when you see achievement most of the time. When sales and marketing and product, everyone has that same goal and they have different ways that they can contribute to it. But then also allowing some creativity. So this is the people side of, you have someone in sales enablement that is really good at some other things and they might be interested in taking those roles. But if you have them boxed into, hey, this is your exact role, this is the goal, and this is how you're compensated for it, and there's no growth there, then you'll likely lose that person, whether they're good or not, that you'll lose them. And so defining a career path is really essential to me in any role, whether it's sales, product marketing, sales enablement, anything that you have. If your team doesn't have a clear, like Sean was saying, if you don't have a clear role, clear success at what that role looks like, and then a clear next step, whether it's with your company or someone else, then you're going to get stagnant. And people are either going to start to dislike their jobs, their roles, and not reach those goals, or they're going to be supercharged and super motivated because they understand that even if they're contributing, it's not directly to their specific role, that's being recognized and they're moving on towards that career path. And so I believe, and I think it was Dennis that said earlier, to like QBRs, I focus almost completely on the career path when I'm meeting with my direct reports of, is what they're doing fulfilling right now? Do we have them pointed in the right direction? And is that in line with the goal of the company? Because if it is, full speed ahead. If their goals are not aligned with the company goals, then we kind of have to readjust and see what we can do to help with that. But just back to people over process. If you align your people and they're motivated, the goals they'll take care of themselves.
Oh, I absolutely love that. That's fantastic. People over process. That's a key takeaway right there when you pass it to you again, Greg. And then let's talk a little bit more process, and what better way to do that than Dennis's amazing slides here. Dennis, I'll pop to you.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a visual guy, right? And again, I just want to make sure that our viewers and listeners get some value and can, take some of these conceptual things we're talking about and take them back to, their day to day and be able to, do their jobs better. So, just in my experience, I was shocked at how many, organizations I've worked with where, roles and responsibilities are just not clearly documented, right? In my mind, if it's not documented or written somewhere, it just doesn't exist, right? Because there's, with the rate of change and turnover and, organizational shifts, like these things often fall through the cracks, right? So it's really important for us to have it documented, have it revisited, and make sure that there's continual alignment on the buyer journey ultimately, right? Because the sales team members are shepherding or taking a buyer through that journey, right? And it's really important that all the different roles and responsibilities are outlined and mapped to that journey, right? Because if you don't have your roles and desired outcomes documented, you just can't expect go-to-market alignment, right? And enablement activities that are targeted or efficient, right? So again, my tip is assess where you are today, use the QBRs as a way to continually align on these roles and expectations based on your strategy, based on your positioning, right? And again, one thing I've created here to kind of help with that is break out your different teams, right? Who are the different roles that you have on your enterprise team or your mid-market team or your inside sales team, whatever you call your teams, right? And make sure you list the different roles under each, right? So you might have SDRs, you might have AEs, you might have sales specialists or engineers, and list what their primary sales role is, right? Are they really responsible for prospecting? Are they responsible for qualification? Are they responsible for closing or pricing or solution crafting, right? Because there's different types of content and also learning that you can target at these folks based on their role. Too often I've seen, get everyone in a room, let's do a training and teach everyone everything, right? And that's really where that fails, right? You need to get much more targeted, tailored, and specific based on how your team members are measured, what are they expected to do to help them succeed, right? So that's why I think that primary sales role is really important. And you may actually find that there may be a gap, right? And if there are gaps, you need to make sure that you assign your different team members with the roles to ensure that they're successful. You'll also see here, I've added a couple other columns in terms of product focus in multi-product companies. Not everyone's always responsible for knowing everything, right? They might be a specialist in a particular business line or a product line. And what you can start to do is actually assess their current knowledge rating on product, their current proficiency on the pitch, right, on a quarterly basis, and then start to measure your impact or how that progresses over time. So that's another good thing to do on a continual basis, because as I said, your team structures are changing, you're hiring new folks are leaving. You need to make sure that you have a good pulse on, what's the current knowledge on the product and how are they comfortable actually delivering that knowledge to a buyer, right? Because just knowing it's not enough, you need to be able to actually have a conversation with the buyer at the end of the day, right? And that's where the pitch or the conversation proficiency comes into play. So again, just something that you can take back and hopefully customize and tailor to your needs. But it's a very simple sort of, diagram that can probably help some of our viewers and listeners today.
Awesome. We've got so many tactics going on here. Jessica, is there anything that you wanted to add or comment on?
I'm an individual contributor, so I'm not generally crafting goals for teams, but I will say that what Greg said about, people over process, I had almost a visceral reaction to that, because I've been in roles where that has been completely ignored and I have gotten stagnant, and I just totally felt that. I've also been at companies where there was such a focus on me as an individual and how I could grow, and that's where I thrived. So I thought that was really well stated, and just wanted to add that.
Perfect. I see that happening in the group chat as well. People are speaking about that. So great. We've talked about content, roles, alignment.
Taylor, can I jump in and just respond to Jessica's comment there real quick?
Yes.
And yeah, it's in the chat. People over process is a big motto of mine, but someone pointed out that process is like the foundation. And for me, the word people over process, that kind of mantra is, make sure your people feel valued over the process. One is not necessarily more important than the other in the goal of getting there. But if your people don't feel valued, you will spend more time finding new people than utilizing a good process. And so your process could be amazing, but if the people don't like you or don't like working there, and they don't feel valued, then you're just going to spin your wheels in hiring and onboarding forever. And that's where, we're all human. We want to feel valued. And in an operational role, in an enablement role, a lot of the time it's easier to focus on the process, the content, the delivery, than on the person that's actually executing. And that's the biggest difference there. But trying to make everyone in Jessica's shoes feel valued, and coming from a sales role, it's so easy for a sales rep to take that and value the person creating content, reach out to them. Hey, this deal would not have happened without this piece of content. Throw them a gift card. Sales guys, if they're good at this, it goes so far in building credibility and capital in a company of you just got paid this huge commission. And there's so many people along the way that probably got paid $100 on that deal. They didn't even get a commission. They don't get compensated that way. If you as a sales rep or a sales leader can go back and identify them. One of the things I really loved about a previous company that I was at is when we closed a big enterprise deal, we gave a little trophy or a little award to everyone that touched the deal, not just the sales rep. The sales rep got commission, but the sales enablement person, the SDR, they would get recognized as part of that deal. And I can't tell you how many times people came in and said hey, that was more than it was expected. That was awesome. You're not doing it for the recognition, but it helps build a lot of loyalty and a lot of trust with your leaders if they're turning around and saying, hey, thank you for doing this for the sales team. Because I think we can all agree that the sales team is probably the most forward facing or the front line of any recognition for the company. And it's not always the case. Some deals, and I'm in a sales organization, some deals are just bluebird, fall in someone's lap, and then the sales rep gets credit for it. But it was really the product team or the marketing team that got a lot of the way there. So that's the people over process, is just make sure everybody's recognized and heard for their value that they're contributing over the systems that they're implementing.
Thank you, Greg. And I actually was going to call on you to start the next one because I think it flows so well. We've got our foundations here with our roles and alignment and our content, and then we've got this people aspect as well. But how do you maintain all of that and enable your teams in a hybrid environment? You're in person, you're online, you're both. Greg, what do you recommend for the folks on the call here and the people watching the recording?
Yeah, I think that it was either talked about in our prep or someone, I think Sean or Dennis has said this earlier on the call here, is you can't over communicate. You can't, in a hybrid world, in a remote world. Our company is headquartered in New Zealand, global offices everywhere. I don't have a single person within 5 states in the US that reports to me. So everything's remote, essentially. Even if I go into the office, I'm managing remote. And the big thing there is that you can't over communicate. Communication needs to be natural, like it would be in an office, not a bunch of task driven like check-ins and mandatory meetings and stand-ups. Just be real, talk to them, schedule time to interact, not about work. And don't, you'll have a good gauge of this is if people start coming to those, non-work interactions, then you're doing it right. If people are willing to connect with you, not in a work meeting, they're just, hey, let's catch up, let's talk, create those types of environments, because it will breed collaboration. And don't just do it with your specific team. Make sure it's cross-departmental, cross-team. Get FaceTime with as many people as you can, even if it's virtually, because that's when you'll go to bat for someone, when you know them personally, when it's not just a number to them. And that's kind of the hardest part, is really just getting personal without being in person.
That's fantastic. I love this people-oriented aspect that you're bringing to the panel here. It's amazing. And Sean, I was going to call on you last because you said I've been calling on you first, but I think what you have to say flows so well with Greg, so sorry.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it kind of reinforces some of what Greg just said. I actually think about this a lot as a manager of a remote team. I used to work at IBM and learned a lot at IBM. When I left, I had 50-something people on my team, and we were all remote. That was my first experience managing a remote team, just all over the world, and realized pretty quickly that I had to create opportunities for informal interaction. Like, people just didn't know each other because I had employees in India and employees in Poland and employees in California. And like they needed to have trust. They needed to understand each other so they could push back if they disagreed. Because if people can't disagree, you have an inferior product that you create, right? Like, they need to have enough trust that disagreement is okay. And I would do things like have stand-ups. I still have stand-ups now, where we have a meeting every day, and that meeting is really mostly us not talking about work. Like, we probably talk about work 20% of the time in stand-up, and we try to replicate what you would do if you came in the morning and you grabbed a cup of coffee and were talking to your coworkers who sat next to you. You know what I'm saying? That's missing now. So if you don't have that, you have to create opportunities for those things to happen. I don't do this anymore, but at IBM, I would actually put people on projects that I just wanted to get the chance to work with each other. And I kind of didn't care sometimes how the project turned out. I just wanted them to work together on something, because you can't say, go talk to each other informally, because then it's weird, right? But if people are working on something and they end up like having multiple meetings over the course of 3 weeks while they do that, well, then they're going to end up talking to each other and they get the chance to like get to know each other a little bit better. But a lot of it's what Greg was saying too. Like my job as a manager is to hire really smart, capable people and put them in situations where they can stay focused on good work and grow as people, right? And the more you can do that, the more you can create the sort of culture that you're looking for. But it begins with seeing people as people, not just as employees.
Thank you, Sean and Greg. I think you have this people-centered approach to this question, which is really fantastic. And then Jessica and Dennis, you have this more tactical approach. So I'm going to scooch over to that piece next. And they're totally all connected. But Jessica, you have something to say about flexibility and accessibility when it comes to the actual, like the content and the tactical piece. So I'm going to pop to you next.
Yeah, and I think it's related to culture too. So I think when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about building an enablement program. And historically it was, if somebody's coming on board, we're having our new hire onboarding, or we're having a product launch, and we're just going to throw everybody in a room for a week straight and have all these front-loaded sessions of everything you might need to know about your onboarding. And then you walk away with all this information and you go on to your job. And obviously that's not really how things work nowadays. It's really hard to do that virtually as well. Like spending all day on a Zoom call is not exactly fun. So I think thinking of ways to create programs that have that hybrid approach of in-person or, face-to-face conversations, and then some of that asynchronous learning is really valuable. So people can take coursework and do things at their own pace, and then you save that live interaction for things we're talking about now, like culture, bonding, rapport, asking questions. So as an example, internally, when we have our onboarding, we have like a course people take on our use cases. And we say, these are all the Allego use cases you need to know as a salesperson. So they take the course, they get familiar with that content. And then we have live sessions with an instructor who goes through the material, and the focus there is getting the team together, making sure that they have their questions answered, making sure they understand the material. And so the time is really being used more for that sort of conversation and getting to know each other. And I think we're thinking the same way about in-person events. Again, if we're having in-person events, like using that time for networking and having the opportunity for people to interact and collaborate and build relationships, and then kind of offloading some of that the learning content into that asynchronous vehicle so that they're able to kind of do both at their own pace.
Thank you, Jessica. Dennis, I think you're going to wrap us all up here with your takes.
Yeah, I don't have a visual for this one, but again, I've been listening to everyone speak here, and I mean, this is a big question, right? I mean, the reality is the market's constantly changing and evolving. I mean, faster than ever before, and so must sales and enablement along with it, right? I really do believe learning is a continuous process and should be treated as such. I mean, in my background and history as a seller, there have been times where we've been asked to, go to corporate headquarters. We do like a 1 month cram session, right, on the product, the market, the method, and then off you go into the field, and then you're expected to, hit your quota on your first month. It's just that I feel like those days are over, right? And I think hybrid environments actually give us an advantage to make learning and content accessible at the moment of need, right? And I think one of the main tenets I have, when I'm working with enablement, is to really protect valuable selling time, right? I think we need to pick and choose synchronous versus asynchronous learning modalities, right? Don't bring people in a room together in a live session unless it's going to be a two-way dialogue, unless it's going to be, that informal, maybe communication or some collaboration or role play, right, as was mentioned earlier. I would really advise folks to move away from sort of the one-way PowerPoint and lectures and live settings. You can make those bite-sized, smaller, accessible in the time of need, right? Versus trying to get everyone in a room at like 12 o'clock when it's sort of prime selling time, right? Everyone's just so pressed for time nowadays. It's so important to really reserve the 9 to 5 for your sales teams to actually sell, right? Don't pull them away from the field. That's just one big sort of, philosophy that I have. And I would say another good thing to do to, enable folks in a hybrid environment is, bring in sellers as members of your enablement team, right? So bring in top performers, bring in people that are actually in the field to help educate others, right? Because I think there's no one else that sellers will respect than others who have actually done it in the field, right? And if you can, bring them into the inner circle of your enablement team and have them deliver your message or partner with you, it gives them good recognition internally, right? Helps their sort of personal brand internally, but also helps others learn and respect from their peers, right? And I think we talked about this earlier in the session, but bringing that experiential learning component into your enablement programs is much easier now in this hybrid environment, right? Because we've been talking about this. You can clip portions of calls or record it, review calls together, right? Think of like a sports analogy. I mean, every single sports team out there, after they're done playing the game, they review the game tape, right? Because that's a really good way to learn. And that's no different in a sales environment, right? So if you can bring in those moments and create that culture of coaching and learning from experiences, I think you're going to really create a high performing sort of sales team, right? So I would say that's my biggest advice, especially in this hybrid environment. That's easier to do than ever. And I don't see as many organizations leveraging that as they could be. So I'll leave folks with that.
All right, Sean's smiling, so I don't know if that means like he's satisfied with the content. I think we're good to wrap up. We only have about 4 minutes left, folks. I know we have 2 questions in the Q&A. Rachel, I think yours was answered in the chat, and then Peter, you've got an answer there. We don't have time to go through them in depth, so I would encourage you to connect with these amazing folks on LinkedIn. I put their LinkedIn profiles if you scroll a little bit more to the top of the chat, and you can ask them your questions there. I just volunteered their time, so hopefully they'll say yes and give some answers for you. But really quickly, I do want to do some key takeaways from our panelists. So panelists, I totally forgot to prepare you for this backstage. I'm so sorry. You're going to have to think on the spot here. But if you had to tweet out something really key, like a gem that you wanted folks to remember and to learn from this content, everything you talked about today, what would it be? So a sentence, 2 sentences. Does anyone want to volunteer first?
I'll go. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is the competition. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me, it's, bring in sales to your enablement team. So bring them into the inner circle and make sure you document, complex decisions and processes. Those are like really important. Make sure it's documented and make sure your sellers are part of your enablement team.
Awesome. This is also the first time I've ever had 2 people just start going for the key takeaways. So big props to you.
It's
Sean,
like Jeopardy. It's like Jeopardy. Right?
Yes, Sean, you can go next.
Dennis beat me on the buzzer. Yeah, for me, this is something I have to remind myself of all the time. Don't do anything unless you know exactly why you're doing it and what metric you're trying to move. And you can communicate that very clearly to all the other stakeholders, right? Like really understanding like why you're doing it and what the intended outcome is 80% of getting alignment on things in my experience.
Awesome. Thank you. Greg, Jessica. Oh, Greg hit the buzzer first.
Yeah, I can go. We'll let Jessica have the last word. Yeah, I think that my theme has kind of been the people, but focusing on who you're working with, not just the content. But to Sean's point, really understanding why you're creating content, like what purpose it's delivering, and from an enablement standpoint is huge. And not having the assumption that there needs to be a piece of content for every piece of the conversation. Sometimes content will become a crutch to a sales rep and they become robots. And that's not your job to teach them to not be a robot from an enablement standpoint, but to have the assumption that the content can sometimes be less is more, and delivering really valuable content it is more valuable than having a piece of content, a slide for every point, every talking point. So, quality over quantity in my mind.
Awesome. Wonderful. Jessica, take us home.
Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here. Just to wrap it up with that. No, I was going to say, in addition to what you were all just saying, I think tying it back to people again, and making sure you're tightly aligned with sales as you're developing content, making sure that that is part of the overall process from beginning to end, and taking what you learn and building that into your content and continuing to iterate.
Woo! All right. Thank you all so much. We made it just in time. It's exactly 3 o'clock because there was so much information happening. So I want to give a huge, huge thank you to Jessica, to Greg, to Sean, to Dennis, to Allego for sponsoring, and to, of course, the people who came and watched the content, but are also super interactive in the chat. I really do encourage you to get connected with our speakers. It was so lovely having you all here. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you all, and hope to see you soon. Panelists, I will see you backstage. Don't forget to hit that switch button. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Bye.